evening. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope you're really going to enjoy what we have to offer, and we would really like you all to participate. This is part of a long-standing collaboration between the Royal College of Surgeons of England and Team Consulting, looking at health innovation. And the webinar actually came about because we had a session at our Women at the Cutting Edge Women in Surgery conference that was really successful and really exciting, and everybody wanted to see a bit more of this. So that's the background for why we have this webinar. We've got some fantastic speakers today, and they are true experts in their field, and they know far more about this than I do. I'm just here as the host. We want you to really enjoy, but really participate. So please put stuff in the Q&A. I will be keeping an eye on it, and we will answer as best we can. We really want you to participate in it. Just to remind you as well that there will be a recording in the email you get when you've done your feedback form. So if there's anything you want to go over or look at again, you're going to be able to do that. I'd like to introduce the rest of the fantastic panel. We've got Laura Zaki. She's Senior Strategy and Innovation Consultant for Team Consulting. She's part of the front-end innovation team. She focuses on strategic directions of early-stage medical design and really wants us as surgeons to be involved in that. She applies cognitive and behavioural science insights to optimise strategy, design and implementation of innovations, because what's better for the clinician is also better for our patients. She leads the Femtech team at Team Consulting and has developed user-centred approaches that tackle unconscious bias in medical device development to build technologies that close the gender health gap. We've also got from Team Consulting Claire Young, who's a Senior Human Factors Consultant. She's responsible for planning and implementing formative and summative studies, both directly and as part of product development. She's got a Doctor of Engineering in Medical Devices from University of Strathclyde, where she compared different design approaches to develop orthopedic instrumentation for hip arthroplasty. And anyone who's done that will know we definitely need some more clinician-friendly instruments there. She's also got a Bachelor of Engineering in Product Design from Glasgow School of Art. Last but definitely not least, we've got Therese Pasha, who's the Surgical Innovation Fellow at the Royal College of Surgeons. She's our first National Surgical Innovation Fellow, and she's a surgical trainee working at the intersection of design, technology and surgery. Her work spans the Royal College Innovation Hub, but also national collaborations with clinicians, engineers and industry to develop and implement new technologies. She is also a medical illustrator and designer, and she's got experience in developing her own health tech products. All these people are really interested in inclusive design and what we can do to make the instruments we use adapt to us, and so that we don't have to adapt to the instruments. And that gives better outcomes for our patients, who also incidentally need the instruments adapted for them. So without further ado, I'd like to open the floor to Laura and Claire to tell you a little bit more about Team Consulting.
Thank you so much. That's a very, very kind introduction, and we're really delighted to be here to raise awareness on this really important issue that we're really passionate about, and we really want to keep the conversation going to foster better and more inclusive innovation in surgery. So as Felicity said, Claire and I work at Team Consulting, which is a medical device design and development agency based in Cambridge. I work in front-end innovation, and I lead Team's Women's Health Group. And as Felicity kindly mentioned, I work on the early stage direction setting of product discovery, strategy, and translation, with a real focus on making sure that there's a real balance between the technical, clinical, commercial, and usability insights when coming up with requirements and letting those guide the entire development. I'll hand over to Claire for a brief introduction as well.
Thank you, Lara. So yes, as Lara's mentioned and Felicity so kindly said, we work at Team, which is solely in medical device development that we're focused on. I'm part of the Human Factors Group, which is designed to kind of make sure that during the development process, the people that are actually going to use the devices are considered and thought about. And we're really excited to just be able to kind of share and talk about this from a kind of design development side today.
Lovely. Yeah. So as we mentioned, we're really passionate about inclusive innovation that tackles the gender health gap in general. And today we'll be discussing that in more detail about what it looks like in surgical devices, especially for female practitioners, and what can be done to change this. So we could go to the next slide, please. We'll begin with a very brief overview of gender bias in surgical devices and the impact of this before we'll actually open it up and hand it over to all of you with an interactive survey so that we can understand your experiences in practice. Finally, we will discuss some ways that we at Team foster inclusivity in device development and ways that you can get involved in this. So just to begin with a very brief overview on this, I'm sure that it won't be news to many of you who will likely have a lot of experience of this firsthand. But we just want to first establish that there is evidence from the literature to back up the experiences that we have heard from countless female surgeons. So we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. The literature shows that 89% of female surgeons report a difficulty with the size of a surgical instrument, and 71% report difficulty with surgical instruments due to grip strength. You can see on the right-hand side here one example of a key physiological gender difference, which is reflecting differences in glove size by sex. So as you can see, the range for female surgeons is about 5 to 7.5 compared to about 5.5 to 9 for males. But the key thing to highlight is that peak around 7. So often in not just in surgical devices, but in medical devices more broadly, and in fact, beyond medical devices, we know that there is a data gap and that a lot of innovations and tools are designed around data that is quite male-centric or male-biased. And this is no exception. So you can imagine that a lot of devices are often designed with that peak of a glove size of 7 in mind, even though that clearly leaves people out systematically, and is in spite of the fact that designing for compatibility of people with smaller glove sizes would often actually be usable by everybody. And in a more specific example, laparoscopic surgery is known to be generally associated with high rates of ergonomic strain due to some of the challenges with grip diameters, with the weight of the instrument and the distance between the thumb and the index finger. And interestingly, laparoscopic instruments that have double ring handle designs actually support neither precision grips nor power grips. And this creates a major onus on the user of the device to actually compensate for this. And evidence has shown that female sex is associated with a 5 times greater chance of physical complaints associated with laparoscopic device use. And that's just one example of a surgical instrument where this bias is at play. Another example is endoscopic devices, where female sex is also a risk factor for injury. Aside from injury, there's also evidence that larger endoscopic controllers can lead to increased endoscopy times in people with smaller glove sizes, and that is even after controlling for dexterity, which is actually, in fact, often greater with a smaller glove size. If we could go to the next slide, please. We want to also address some more detail about the impact of this bias that we see in surgical devices. So this spans all the way from things like the amount of effort and the fatigue imposed upon the practitioner to the actual performance and speed and even injury. So poor instrument design on a more technical level means that surgeons would have to adopt a different position. So one that is a non-neutral wrist position of wrist flexion or ulnar deviation for extended periods in order to compensate for the fact that the device hasn't really been designed for them. And the impact of that means that there can be less decreased muscle strength. It could require more effort to complete the task and potentially also more time. And all of this increases the risk of overload and injury and affects performance. And so ultimately, often surgeons will have to change their technique, and I'm sure many of you will have had this experience, or use a two-handed technique to get the power and or the precision that is needed. And that puts, as Felicity mentioned earlier, it puts the onus on the user instead of having devices that are actually designed for them. We also wanted to address some of the examples of the gender bias in these devices having quite severe health impact. So another example, in the case of lead protection garments to protect clinicians from radiation exposure, there is evidence that many of the standard garments that are used actually have inadequate protection of the breast tissue. And the impact of this is that there is a notable increased prevalence of breast cancer in female orthopedic surgeons, with one study suggesting a 2.9 times greater incidence compared to the general female population. And so there is work on improving these vests. There are different options out there, but it's just a tragic example of these different different options being developed in reaction to data like that, instead of these risks and the differences in risk between subgroups being assessed carefully and systematically in the development process and when this equipment was being designed. At this point, I think we would like to kind of hand it over to all of you, and we'd love to collect a little bit of data on your experience. So just to note that this is all anonymized. We're going to be using an online survey tool called Menti to ask a few survey questions and get a sense of the experiences of all of you here today. So you can use this QR code if you're using a phone. You can scan the QR code, or you can go to menti.com and input the code on screen here. If you have any difficulty with this, please let us know. We can try to provide you some support in the chat. We'll also provide a link that you can open in case you prefer to open it on your laptop. So just give people a few moments to join. Lovely. Okay. People are already starting. Wonderful. So the first question is, have you ever used a surgical instrument or a piece of equipment that you felt was not well suited to you? Simple yes or no question. This is quite nicely aligned with some of the data that we just presented on the previous slide. It seems like it's quite a pervasive issue for the attendees today. Okay. Give it a couple more moments. What we'd love to do is get a little bit more background behind these experiences. So we'll move on to some more questions. If you have had this experience, which many of you report to have had, what did you experience as a result of this? So you can select more than one, but was it fatigue? Was it pain? Was it slowed or impaired performance, or something else? It's quite a mixture.
And if you select other, if you don't mind putting it in the chat or the conversation, kind of what that was, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
That would be great. Definitely something that we would love to follow up on in the discussion afterwards. Okay, so it looks like pain and discomfort being the most common, but the other options also pretty prevalent. Slowed impaired performance, okay. Quite a lot of fatigue. A few other options that we'd love to hear about. Okay, we're going to move on to the next question, which is about what kind of instrument or procedure you experience this with. So you should be able to input some text on this one, and hopefully we'll see your responses coming through. But we'd love to know about the types of procedures where you've specifically found these issues. And I know that many of you will come from different specialties, but it's great to have a sense. Okay, so laparoscopic and endoscopic again. Cement guns, spinal surgery, needle holders, scissors, retractors. There's quite a lot of common responses, but quite a range of different ones. We'd love to dig into that a little bit more in the discussion. Shoes, yes, shoe sizes, scrubs and PPE, left-handed equipment, absolutely. Staplers. Yeah, interesting to see some responses about specifically also when pregnant, that there are some difficulties with the PPE. Lots of different responses, which is unfortunate to see, but not altogether very surprising. We'll start to group some of these different responses also so that we can have a better idea of some of the overlap. But thank you so much for sharing all these specific examples. That's extremely helpful to us as we raise awareness around these issues. So we'd love to ask a little bit more as well about the cause of these problems, or what you see to be the cause. So we talked in the beginning about evidence from the literature that suggests complaints around grip strength as well as size. But we know that there's a lot more behind the design of these devices and a lot of different factors at play. So interested in your perspective on what the key root of the problem is when the device doesn't suit you. And again, if there are some other suggestions that you have, please do drop those into the chat so that we can address them as well. It's quite a wide range. It's interesting that the size and shape seems to be a little bit more of a pervasive issue than weight in this group, and also the proportions more specifically, which I think is what we've often observed in laparoscopic devices, especially. Grip strength and posture as well. We just talked about less, but we've heard a lot about. Any additional suggestions in the chat? Wow. All right, moving on to the next question is about how you handle the situation. So what do you do when this happens? Do you have to change your technique? Do you switch to a different instrument? Do you contact the manufacturer, report it, or do nothing? We know that also some of these options are really not necessarily straightforward, reporting it or switching to a new instrument. So if you have any additional context to share on that you'd like to address, if you could drop it in the chat, that would really be very helpful. But unfortunately, we are seeing what we would expect, which is that a lot of people are forced to change their technique. And people are often just told to kind of lump it, that you have to adapt the device, that it's your problem or your responsibility if the device isn't that convenient for you, which is what we're trying to tackle, what we're trying to fight against. So a lot of people reporting that there's nothing to do about it, nothing that you can change. And finally, we wanted to ask if anybody here has ever taken part in the design and development process of a medical device or piece of equipment. It'd be great to get a sense from this group how many have that experience. Very few. About 10%. Well, that is an important segue into what we're going to talk about next, which is what you can do about this situation and how you can get involved. So Claire is going to talk a little bit more about that, about what we do at Team and ways that you can actually get involved in this to make sure that your voices are being heard in the design and development process to tackle this bias. So I'll hand it over to Claire.
Great, thank you, Lara. So as Lara mentioned, I'll now just share a little bit about what we do to kind of foster inclusivity in the kind of development process. If you're able to move to the next slide, that'd be great. Thank you. So regulatory guidance does actually require that the design of a device must meet the needs, kind of capabilities and limitations of intended users. And so inclusivity of during kind of development must happen right at the beginning when that intended user and the kind of characteristic of that user are being defined. So Lara and I work for a consultancy. We develop surgical equipment at times, and I specifically work in human factors, which I mentioned is making sure that the user really is able to actually use the device that's going to be designed for them. And at the start of any development project, one of the first documents that I'll write is called a specification, which details who's going to use the device and what their key characteristics are. So it could be easy to just state that in that use specification, my user is a surgeon, there will be a range of hand sizes, a range of kind of grip strengths, and that's kind of it. But I feel really at this point, this is when that document has to go further and be much more specific. It's at this stage in development that it's really important. I want factors such as grip span, functional reach, kind of awareness of like poor fitting PPE, what's the impact of glove size on tactile sensitivity, to just be kind of noted and be accounted for, and people be more aware of that at this point when we go through the design process. So this document, this use specification, really is the basis for any design requirement or device specification. And it's one of the benchmarks that our designers will use to kind of check any kind of concepts or ideas against to make sure. So this document is so important to make sure that it really does accurately reflect intended users to the level of detail that's required, and that these kind of factors and considerations are taken in at this point. So specification kind of values are often taken from anthropometric data. For example, kind of the range, what is the range of kind of grip span across surgeons? But it's also vital in this process to make sure the value that's being taken is actually informed by both female and male kind of surgeons. Predominantly, anthropometric data has historically been dominated by male data. It was actually the first cohort of female astronauts in 1978 forced NASA to have to redesign all their systems, and it forced female anthropometrics to come into engineering standards. But a lot of surgical instruments and OR layouts and kind of design actually trace their ergonomic layouts back to military, aviation, industrial tool design, which were implicitly based on male anthropometrics. The root of many usability issues is not due to the kind of absence of available data in female anthropometrics. It's due to the fact that designs are often based on legacy design decisions and implied in that direction. The regulators also specify before any device is approved that manufacturers must demonstrate that intended users can use the device safely and effectively. A big part of my job is conducting usability testing, as Felicity mentioned, which is where intended users will try the device and provide feedback. Again, it's vital to make sure the participants that we involve and take part in that research really do represent the range of those intended users. Are you okay to move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So how do we involve surgeons in the design process? So some of the ways that we do it, and one of them is we'll conduct what we call contextual analysis. This is where we come and observe current use. We want to build an understanding of the environment in which a device is to be used and quite simply watch. A big part of what I do is stand in the corner and watch kind of how you do things, how you get on with things, and notice the things you're not even aware of because you're so used to just getting on with it and accommodating for them. It's those things early on in the design process we want to be aware and design out. It's also important that we as designers understand the wider surgical procedure that a device will be used for. I was recently working on a device to be used with an endoscope and very quickly learned that endoscopic kind of technique varies significantly. And so it was really beneficial to be able to observe that and see that so that the wider team are able to understand the variations and that it can be accounted for. But being able to kind of, from a designer's point of view, being able to get into surgery, to get into kind of clinics and observe this is not easy. So any involvement and any link there is beneficial for us. Secondly, we love to have key opinion leaders involvement in those development programs. We often have one or two clinicians involved during development that we can speak to, we can ask questions of. Sometimes that is involving kind of answering questions I might have about risk documentation. If I say, if this happens with the device, what will happen to the patient? What will happen during your surgery? What's the kind of clinical risk of this? But other times I want to be able to have feedback on prototypes and kind of a range of different ideas. Thirdly, as I mentioned, we want to make sure that anthropometric data that we're using is representative. So we conduct studies to gather that data to be able to confirm and justify the specifications that we are using in that use specification. And the most common way is really by conducting user research, as we mentioned. I'll conduct user research in a simulated setting because I want to check that it's safe to use the device in a kind of as representative a way as possible. For surgical devices, this is often done in a surgical simulation suite. I'll make sure the right equipment is there, PPE, appropriate kind of patient model, whether that's cadaveric or animal tissue. And I'll ask people to walk through the whole procedure so we can find how people use the device and get their feedback. Are you able to move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So how can you get involved? Firstly, I would just encourage you, if there's an issue with a device that you experience something that's uncomfortable or somewhere that you have to kind of compensate or change your technique, contact the manufacturer and tell them. There's a legal obligation to track, investigate, and act on post-market complaints. That's what drives a lot of the development process. They will look at post-market complaints and feed that back in. So if there's an issue with a device, this really is a great way to be able to provide that information back to them. And secondly, I would also really encourage you to take part in user research and a usability study. We work with a recruitment partner called Intelligent Fieldwork, who are based in the UK, who are always looking for clinicians. And we at Team are growing our network of clinical experts to contact for their opinion and input on those kind of early stage developments. So if you'd be interested to be part of that network, please feel free to sign up using the QR code on the next slide. Great, thank you. I'll give that a minute and then I will hand over to Therese.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Therese Pasha. I am the first Surgical Innovation Fellow at the Royal College of Surgeons of England and the iHub, as well as the London Institute for Healthcare Engineering. So today my presentation is all about closing the gap in surgical device design, or otherwise known as It's Not You, It's the Stapler. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my own experience as a 5'4" left-handed female surgical trainee, and then my work at the iHub and LIHE, and what we have done to tackle this problem and how you can get involved. So let me just get this cursor out of the way. So this is a picture of a circular staple. I've taken it from Gynae Geek, who is someone who is an obstetric and gynecology surgeon on Instagram, and showed her hand grip using a circular staple. This is something that I've used definitely in my general surgery placements. And, you know, if you have a size 6 or smaller hand, your little finger barely reaches the handle. And research shows that if you don't have your little finger, your grip strength is reduced by 33%, which is a huge amount. And that's not because you're weak, it's because nobody measured a hand like ours when they're designing the thing. Later in vascular surgery, during my core surgical training, I became very familiar with the theatre stool as a survival device. I was always balancing on stools, steps, stacked platforms, and occasionally some arrangements that would make any health and safety nurse run away, or to get myself on the same operating height as colleagues whose anatomy seemed to have been assumed by the furniture. And whilst I was pregnant in plastic surgery, I became much more aware of another issue, and that's radiation protection. In hand trauma, intraoperative x-rays are normal practice. But when you're pregnant, you suddenly become very conscious of the PPE you're given and its lack of protection. Many of my female colleagues would actually step away from the operating theatre when there was a C-arm involved. But if you're the only surgeon in the room, who then does the operation? And then there was no policy or kind of plan B in place to protect those individuals. So at some point, I stopped thinking of these small things as inconveniences, and I started to see them as data points. Every stapler, every step stool, every ill-fitting lead apron, it wasn't bad skill or weakness on our part, it was design, or rather the absence of it, or like Claire mentioned, the design of our male counterparts. And in surgery, where performance is directly tied to patient safety, adapting yourself around inadequate tools is not resilience. It's a system failure that we have been too polite to name. Oh. So operating theatres are really complex engineered environments. They bring together humans, instruments, imaging systems, PPE, and time-critical decision-making for high-risk stakes, which is human lives. But many of these systems were designed around historical assumptions of the average user. And as you all might know, the moment you design for the average, you exclude the majority. And this shows up as mismatches everywhere. A lot of them we've already touched on. Some additional ones are looking down and getting MSK problems and tools that this may not be gender disparity specifically, but only work on one side of the body. So for right-handed specific tools, something that I am a long-term sufferer of. And this really is a human system interface problem. It results in real safety, performance, and sustainability issues. There's lots and lots of data out there. Some of them I know that Lara's already touched on it directly affecting the health of the surgeons as well as the patients that they treat. Specifically, there is a lot of data actually showing that there's measurable disadvantages to the actual performance and therefore patients when you've got these tools in place. And this well-known and well-cited, really sad statistic that female orthopedic surgeons have an up to almost 4 times higher chance of breast cancer compared to the average population. And it's really important to reiterate this. It is not a user problem. These systems are optimized for theoretical use rather than real-world variability. There are other industries out there, aerospace, automotive, even the sports industry, where they have made these adjustments and surgery just lags behind them. In other industries, this would be seen as a complete design failure, frankly. So here at the iHub, we asked, what would it look like if we were to design the system around human variability and really scrap everything back to first principles? The reason we wanted to ask this question was actually because of you guys. When I first started my fellowship, one of the really big goals I wanted to achieve was get a really good snapshot of clinical unmet need from the surgical community, because we know that clinical unmet needs are the bedrock of any innovation. So what we started with was a campaign where if you wanted to join the iHub, you had to answer a question, which is what slows you down in theatre? What is the one inefficiency or problem that you're having? And how often does it happen a week and how long for? And with that, we developed a database full of clinical unmet need, validated and submitted by real-world surgeons such as yourselves. And any guesses of what one of the most common repeated themes submitted was? It all fell into the category of non-inclusive theatre design. It fell all into the category of what we're speaking about today, which I think further validates truly how big of a problem this is. Okay, but great. So we've got this evidence base under our belt of like showing that it's a real problem. What did we do about it? Well, we held, together with Team Consulting, LIHE, which is the London Institute of Healthcare Engineering, NIHR, HRC, and the RCS iHub, we held a day called the Surgical Innovation Ideathon. It was the first of its kind, happened 2 months ago, where we united surgeons, engineers, and academics together with our industry partner, Team Consulting, to really try and drive meaningful innovation from validated clinical problems. We had 3 validated clinical problems, one of them being the topic we're talking about today. Whilst I can't go into detail of some of the wonderful, amazing solutions that the teams came up with, just to give you an idea of some of the topics that were covered, it was ambidextrous tools, proper adjustable PPE, passive sensing systems, or even just rethinking the spatial layout of the theatre environment altogether. And there was a little here that my animation didn't work, and that's dynamic adjustability. So having tools and equipment around you that would adjust for different variable heights. Now, this is, it's important to say that this isn't a simple problem, right? We're working with sterile environments. It's a high time pressured environment with staff that have a high cognitive load. Dealing with legacy infrastructure. And these are really extremely cost sensitive and cost conscious systems that we work in. So it's all about what innovation actually works in all these factors and how do we integrate into this complex socio-technical system. From the Ideathon, this was a team picture we took, and yeah, I would just like to kind of just highlight how wonderful it is to bring together not just senior consultant surgeons and trainees, but professors of robotics, data scientists, and of course our wonderful industry partner at Team Consulting, all working at LIHE, doing work that would otherwise take weeks to months, all in a condensed and very intense, almost 10-hour day. So this was a day run by the iHub. It may be that many of you don't know that we exist. It's something that started only a few years ago. And the vision of the iHub really is to act as a connector, and it's to bring members together and connect them, frontline surgical innovators, with academia and industry to create and adopt world-class innovation in surgery. And part of the iHub is me, and I'm currently the National Surgical Innovation Fellow. It's the first of its kind, and it's a really, really wonderful fellowship because I split my time at RCS of England as well as the London Institute of Healthcare Engineering. From the RCS side, I support the surgeons with their innovation. I help run the innovation clinics and the programs and talks and things like that, but also help run policy and strategy to help develop perhaps a formalized innovator clinician pathway akin to the academic one. At LIHE, I support the programs that they run there. So they run accelerators and venture builders that are all to do with medical devices or software as medical devices, and I support with the sort of clinical application, surgical application of those, and also conduct some translational research through the NIHR Health Tech Research Center. It's a really wonderful place which someone like me, I can learn a lot from, because otherwise I'm in a surgical training program. I'm now alongside specialists in regulation, product development, and business. And I thought it'd be a good opportunity to talk about this fellowship because the job description is going to come out soon. And for anyone here interested in it for next year, I can't recommend it enough. So back to the iHub, it's a innovation hub for surgeons by surgeon. So we support surgical innovators, we upskill the surgical membership base and in innovation and technology, and also support the development of a community and network. And we act as a connector. And the reason this exists is because often medtech's developed for clinicians. We're often the end users, but not with us. And we know that when you have the end user in mind from the beginning of your innovation development, that the outcomes are much more effective. It is just a better outcome for all. this is our team. Some of you may know some of these wonderful people. We've got consultant surgeons who've balanced a career in surgery, as well as entrepreneurship in health tech, in academia and robotics. And welcome to contact any of us if you have any questions. And to just take it back to the point of this talk is that, I just want to leave you with this, that we've engineered precision for the patient, but we've left variability in the system for the person delivering it. And I think it's time we change that. So if you're inspired by any of the conversations today and you have an innovation that you're thinking about in this space or otherwise that you want to contact iHub for, you're very welcome. This is the QR code to join our community. We've got a thriving WhatsApp group, newsletter, and you'll be the first to know of any events, programs, as well as any other opportunities. So thank you very much.
Lovely, thank you. That was amazing. Apart from using the QR code, Therese, how can people contact iHub? Is it on the college website, or what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so if you literally just check on the college website, iHub, the webpage is going to change soon. So currently there's an email that you can contact to book our innovation clinic, and then the QR code will allow you to be added to the WhatsApp group and the newsletter. And if you follow any of the members, we will always post things about it as well. And you're very welcome to contact me as well. Soon the page will be changed in the next few months, where it will work as a resource hub where you can get information on basics on IP, on how to develop your idea, on how to seek funding, and then also an actual a button where you can book an innovation clinic, which is a Teams meeting where you can have a half-an-hour slot with us to discuss your innovation in confidence and try and support us any way we can. For any innovation as well, I should say that meets the criteria and is particularly promising, we can also recommend you and fast track you into one of the LIHE programs, which is a really amazing resource and opportunity for our surgeons. So yeah, use us, because there are some really great resources out there.
That sounds amazing. The idea that you can fast track through doing that's fantastic. And is that the best way to contact Team Consulting that way, or can they contact your team directly? Do you think, Lara and Claire?
Yeah, so the QR code that Claire displayed is a great way to get straight into the database, but you can also contact us directly and we'll make sure that your name gets in there so you could get contacted for future research opportunities. So we can pop our email addresses into the chat as well, and please feel free to get in touch with us if you have any questions or are interested in getting involved.
And just to say in the chat, Deborah Eastwood's put a link about how to stay safe with ionizing radiation in theatre, so thank you, Deborah, for doing that. And also thank you to Elaine Stevenson, who mentioned the horrendous wide guns, and there's not just them, is there? There's all those wide bone cutters and things that have annoyed me my entire career, so which are really, really painful to use, and shown very nicely, I thought, in Therese's, about the grip in Therese's thing. It's absolutely drives me crazy. So I just thought I would say that. If anyone wants to ask any questions, just pop them in the Q&A and we will ask. My other thoughts were about legacy instruments. I do wonder if the instruments were never designed to suit anybody. I don't know how well they suit any of our male colleagues either. I don't know if anyone had any thoughts on that. That they were just designed so long ago, half of them, that they just don't fit anybody, I don't think.
I think that's absolutely fair. You mentioned kind of orthopedics at the beginning, and those instruments in particular of just as you say, I think there is an impact of kind of legacy device design, and then when instruments get updated, it is based on what's gone before, rather than being able to step back and think, actually, is this the best way to do it, and is this the best kind of design? Or often it takes something quite disruptive to be able to stop and think, wait, let's pause and think about it. And I think that's what's so good about the kind of like the work that they're doing kind of at iHub, and those kind of surgical, the sprints and the innovation of just being able to take that time to be like, actually, we're going to stop and we're going to get together and take some time to think, could we be doing this differently? Because I think often it just continues on without the time or ability to challenge actually what's gone before.
And I just noticed Sarah's asked in the chat that there's an innovation fellowship at Alder Hey as well. I don't know, Teresa, their college team linked in with that as well.
I am aware of the Alder Hey Innovation Centre and the amazing work that is it Ian Hennessy that does. And I believe he's been invited to be part of the, we've established the National Surgical Innovation Network, essentially to address this problem that there's a lot of pockets of innovation happening across the UK, and we need to be better at connecting them and making it more cohesive. So yeah, we are in talks, and hopefully we can establish a more cohesive innovation effort in clinical practice.
And the other, I'm just going to say this now because I didn't put it in my responses, but the other thing that I find totally not ergonomic is the operating table, which if you're, I mean, I'm not that short, but I find a lot of operating tables are too high. And if you're short, you have to stand on a step. So if anyone ever wants to design operating tables that actually go low enough down, that would be really nice. And I don't know if other people have that experience, but I forgot to put that in. So that was my other thought, that even everything from the scrubs not fitting because they're designed for men, to just the table being too high, particularly if you're doing stuff deep in the pelvis or deep under the rib cage. You sort of have to drop the table and hoik yourself up on it and things like that, which you shouldn't really need to do. Just to all of you, how do we change that? How do we make all those old-fashioned things, particularly with all the costs incurred? How do we think that we can change this going forward, so that in the future people don't have to it's good for your calf muscles, yeah, probably, but it also twists your back, so it's not so great for that. What do you think are the things? How are we going to change this in a cash-strapped NHS? I don't know, Laura and Claire, that's possibly one for you a bit more. How can we change this?
I think it has to start by just raising awareness of it being an issue. I think you all do such a wonderful job of, just as you say, you get a stool in and you get on with it because that's what you have to do, that it's often kind of just accepted that you kind of have a way to kind of work around. And I don't know if there's as wide a knowledge of how big an issue it is, or how difficult a challenge it is. I know if I spoke to my colleagues, I'm not sure my colleagues would be aware of, in the operating room, of that being such a kind of concern, as actually the operating table itself as being a kind of key challenge that you face. So I guess I would suggest potentially maybe we need to think about how do we make this known, and how do we make this known as it's not okay, but obviously without raising patient concern.
Yeah, so Deborah's put a couple of things in the discussion. She said it's really difficult to have the table at the right height for the whole team. It is, and I do sometimes think that you could have it lower and some people could sit down, rather than, sometimes that's safer than the stools, which are can be quite dangerous, as I'm sure people have discovered. And she's also saying about how in orthopedics, they are trying to get the companies to design so that things come in two sizes. I mean, you could easily have that, couldn't you? A smaller handle and a larger handle with the main piece of the instrument. Say for laparoscopic instruments would be a good example of that. And I think those are all things that we need to. I feel like I've given orthopedics a bit of a bash about the instruments, but I still use some orthopedic instruments in vascular, and that's why I struggle a bit. The orthopods themselves often have better instruments, I'd just like to say. I think we get the ones that are sat at the back of the cupboard. But
I also, just to add to it, I think ultimately, I'm sitting here doing a whole talk on this, but I've never reported an instrument to the company. So I think it's starting this conversation, naming it, putting an awareness to it. So the next time you have an issue taking the tool, you're not just thinking, oh, it's my 700th friction of that day. It's actually, I'm empowered and I know that I can escalate this and report it to make a change. So perhaps that's the most realistic. because it doesn't cost us any extra money. It's then to the actual companies that produce them.
Cara said she sent some inserts for laparoscopy instruments to reduce the grip, but they didn't fit. The inserts didn't, that's just sort of difficult. I'll send you a bit of plastic, but it doesn't really work.
Says it all, really.
It does. And I think the other thing that I wanted to comment on, which unfortunately Colin wasn't able to come, but which he's been working on, is that a lot of these instruments, and this is very true in vascular, don't fit the patients either. They're designed to go in vascular to go up male arteries. They don't actually fit in women's arteries, and they're not the right sizes for women's arteries. So there's another aspect of getting that patient, and we should be reporting that too. And in fact, people did, and that a lot of the instruments, our endovascular instruments, have been changed because people did report, actually, we can't use these in our female patients, and also in other parts of the world, particularly in Asia with the big Chinese market. They just weren't interested in instruments that didn't go up for them.
See, that's terrible.
It's very scary. I think one thing I would add also to the question you raised earlier about what we can do, and it's very much related to this, is that unfortunately in a cash-strapped system, so much of what will get funded and what will get supported needs a really clear economic argument. So we can talk about this a lot, about the effect that it has on the surgeons, and it's completely true and completely validated. But for innovators who are bringing these new solutions for approval or for reimbursement, they need to really demonstrate that there is a reason that introducing a more adjustable solution, for example, or an additional size solution would be actually cost effective as well. So I guess the only thing to think about, the one thing I wanted to flag to this group on that, is that when you are talking about it and when you're reporting it, to be thinking about the ways that we can raise awareness about the actual effects on you, on your productivity, on your patients, on their health outcomes, these things that can be really specifically combined into a health economic argument as well, because the more data there is on that, the better for the innovators.
And is one of the reasons given for robotics, actually, that because you're sitting down and it's more ergonomic, that you will extend the useful, productive life of your surgeons.
Exactly.
I'm not a robotic surgeon, so I can't say how well suited. Certainly when I've had a little fiddle, they've seemed okay, but I can't honestly comment on how well suited they are for smaller people and for women, so I can't comment on that. But that's one of the reasons they give, that actually you have a calmer surgeon who's less likely to have, the back problems and shoulder problems that older surgeons tend to have, I'm afraid.
And it is interesting in terms of companies and clients do come to us and they say, we are getting lots of complaints about this device. We need to do something about it. Can you have a look at this device and can you improve it? And when they get complaints, then there's pressure that they have to do something with that and they have to improve it. So really, as you were saying, of those that is the other way of clients do come to us and say, we have this tool that's getting all these complaints. We need to do something about it. Can you look at it? Can you review it? What's the issue? And that's the other way from it makes that economic justification of when there's pressure on them that they're getting complaints about a device, they legally have to do something about it. So really don't underestimate the power of saying this does not work and there's an issue with it.
How do we get companies to involve you before they get to that point, though?
Yeah, I know.
That's the other problem, isn't it? We shouldn't ever be getting to that point.
No. And I think there is more awareness, there is more engagement. Now I think the speaking about robotics, and I know that robotics are engaged in this topic of human factors and making sure that they're the ergonomics. It's much more part of the discussion. But I agree, it's how do you get manufacturers to challenge their design process, don't just design it based on what was approved before.
I've just, on that subject, Neha's just put in, robotic consoles with poorly designed stools lose all their ergonomic value. I think theatre stools are a whole design concept, because they're not very ergonomic at all, and they can end up on the floor. That's something we don't seem to, how to sit on something in theatre, we don't seem to have resolved at all, actually. And Karen's commented about the growing size of patients causing more ergonomic problems even than perhaps the instruments. But again, is that something around our instruments not being right for those patients? I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there to see what you think.
I think the solution to a lot of these would be adjustable equipment, both for the ones that we use in patients that are, for example, like a telescope adjustable in length and things. Because then you don't need to, and also that's a very cost-effective solution. Suddenly you don't need 2 entire sets of 2 different sizes. You just need one that solves everyone's size from surgeon and patient. But that's a design challenge.
Yeah, I think that's a real challenge with needle holders, isn't it? With very big patients, how do you get a needle holder that's ergonomic but that will reach down far enough, and how to get an adjustable instrument that is reliable as well, that doesn't move.
Yeah. So you lose a lot of that precision, perhaps.
And it's also helpful for me to kind of understand and learn that of when it comes to those specifications, when it's a tool. Well, I'm obviously very much spoken about this from a user point of view of the surgeon, but also with some devices, your patient is just as much of a user in that regard. So actually making sure that the specifications of the patient are also representative is also critical.
And Sarah's asked, are the grips for the robot designed for female hands? That's what I don't know, because I'm not a robotic surgeon. I know that some women have struggled to get access to the robot, but I don't think that that's necessarily because of the instruments. But I don't.
I'd be really keen to know. I'd be really keen to know from people who've kind of used them. I know kind of the companies have spoken a lot about the kind of importance of human factors and ergonomics in the design and development. So it would be really keen to kind of hear, is that in practice?
We've had an expert comment. Nuha's in the chat. She said different hand controllers for different platforms. Some are okay and some aren't for female hands. Yeah, well, that sums it up, doesn't it? But they should all be. This is modern technology.
Yeah, they should all be.
But left-handed colleagues like the robots. So there you are. Maybe we should be doing more, Therese. Because not having left-handed instruments, we know that there are fewer left-handed consultants than there are left-handed people in the population, and that's not very surprising when you can hardly get an instrument that works.
That's just for the lefties, I say.
If it helps, when I run a study, I make sure I always see at least 10% of my sample needs to be left-handed users.
Oh, that's very good.
So I have made sure that I have seen left-handed surgeons also use my devices.
So we said that the controllers are reasonably well suited for female hands. That's my impression when I've played with them, I must say. Just in the final couple of minutes, just what would your final messages be to our audience about what to do next?
I would just say from like a surgical training's perspective, I think it's that like understanding that it's not you and you're not the problem, you're not weak, you're not a worse, you're not less dexterous or you have less stamina or your muscles aren't strong enough. It is a design issue, and I think that understanding and that language around it, I think there's an empowerment in that. And then what can you do about it is engage with team consulting, engage with iHub, and engage with reporting these equipments, because I think that's where our power lies. And continuing on the conversation in your departments and things like that.
Yeah, I would echo exactly that. I think it's about getting involved would be my kind of encouragement. Make sure that you get involved, that we're kind of continuing this discussion and awareness of people who are coming into your department, making sure they kind of are aware of that, knowing that across kind of different levels of seniority. So it's not just people who are senior who've kind of gone through it that feel they're able to do it, but actually people who are new and just coming into your department. So I would just encourage everyone to just keep engaging and keep being involved with us.
That sounds a fantastic way to end. Get involved, stay involved, and together we can all make it better. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming to speak tonight. It's been a really fantastic meeting, and I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed the comments in the discussion forum. That's been great. So thank you so much for that. Oh, and just in case you don't know, the next Future of Surgery Festival is at the Liverpool campus, 30th to 14th of April next year. It was fantastic this year. I really enjoyed it. It was a festival rather than a conference. It was excellent. So I would encourage everybody to come next year. You'll have a great time.